Hey guys, me again. What better sign of the end of times than me becoming a video blogger or YouTuber? Um, Surely a sign of the apocalypse, in my opinion. So just got back from the hospital and some questions about COVID and disinfecting came up. So I looked up some answers and thought I'd share what I found there. Before we get into that, just had some thoughts on the virtualization of our society. Some of you may know that in my other life, I am a public speaker, and some of my work has included needing to and having to forecast the future over the next 100 years. I've done that multiple times, specifically in the context of science, society, space, education, technology. I first did that in 2015. Interesting to see what came true and what was wildly inaccurate. Most recently did that for a class I teach in at the university called Technology and the Future of Medicine. I did that about a week or two ago. Definitely did not predict a pandemic. And so it's interesting because in most of these talks, I do predict the complete virtualization of society because of the need to. And usually it's because of the lack of physical space. Further on, decades down the road, closer to the turn of the century, because of the effects of climate change, global warming, lack of physical land space, and being necessarily forced into the virtual and AR world. It's interesting because we're being forced into this situation a little bit decades ahead of schedule, by my prediction, anyways. So it's interesting to see how we're trying to adapt. And for me, I feel this most keenly in clinical practice because there's so much information. I think I said this a few videos ago that you can get from the physical exam, even if I'm not actively examining a patient, just watching their facial expression, just watching their body language, hearing the tone of their voice. You can pick up a little bit of that over the telephone. So it'll be interesting to see where we end up in terms of our comfort with staying virtual once all of this pandemic is has passed, and I do hope it will pass. Whether that's 3 months down the road, 18 months, I suspect it'll be later rather than sooner, given what we're seeing with the rate of spread of COVID-19. But what I suspect ultimately is we will return more to our physical world rather than staying primarily in the virtual world, because of the amount of sensory information that we get and that we're losing by not being physically in touch. So whether that's the visual information that we get from the amount of shadows and textures and various hues of colors. A lot of that, we have high resolution video these days, but a lot of that is still decimated when compared to how much the human eye can process. What we see in terms of social cues, body language, smell, touch, haptics, that is the touch feedback that we get from touching something. And then just, physiological responses and hormonal releases we get from being in proximity to one another. So I suspect that once COVID has passed, and I'm optimistic that it will eventually with the right strict disciplined measures. So stay home, wash your hands. I'll be saying that. I'll never stop saying that. That we will be returning more to the status quo in our previous physical lives, just because we're not ready to adopt virtualization, because the loss of sensory data right now isn't being made up by the technologies we have. So just my prediction on where we'll end up in terms of the virtual world post-COVID. So I promised to talk about some of the science about COVID. So one of the questions that came up was, what do we use to sterilize? Is it enough? And so specifically the question at the hospital was, is 0.5% hydrogen peroxide wipes enough to sterilize the surface? And from my research, I've read multiple sites and multiple scientific articles, news articles, academic institutions articles, and here is what you should be doing to disinfect your surfaces. So 0.5% to 3% hydrogen peroxide to wipe down a surface is fine. Leave it on for a minute to help disrupt the capsular portion of the virus to kill it. Don't mix any different chemicals that you may see. So you can either use bleach, you can either use a 70% or above alcohol solution, or you can use hydrogen peroxide, but don't mix your chemicals because of the potential for chemical byproducts that can be harmful to your health. And then just be aware that some of these chemicals have the potential to discolor plastics, the acidity, and the chemical interaction between certain surfaces like plastics, marble, granite can disrupt those surfaces. So specifically a high concentration of hydrogen peroxide above 3% can disrupt marble and granite because of the acidity. So going into the specifics, so we talked about hydrogen peroxide and the need to wipe surfaces down for at least and leave it there for a minute. You can use soap and water as well. Again, leave it on the surface for 30 seconds to a minute. If you're using an alcohol-based solution, it needs to be at least 70% and needs to be on a surface for 30 seconds. Just touch my face. It's really, really hard not to. So you can, coming back to the isopropyl alcohol, use it for at least 30 seconds. You may have seen rumors that you can use vodka. You can't. Don't use vodka. Don't use tea tree oil. Don't use acetic acid or vinegar. They just won't work. Vodka is only 40%, so it's not strong enough. If you're using an alcohol-based solution, leave it on for 30 seconds. And then if you're going to use bleach, use a third of a cup in 1 gallon. That's per CDC guidelines to wipe down a surface. If you're wiping anything down in bleach, make sure you're rinsing out the bucket or the container that you've kept it in to hold the bleach water formulation so you're not discoloring or disrupting the plastic container. And then above and beyond that, if you're in contact with surfaces frequently, especially if you have immunocompromised people in your home, maybe consider wiping down things 3 times a day, okay? But the most important thing is wash your hands, because the thing that you can't get away from is these. They're with you. You can walk away from a table, you can walk away from toys, but you can't walk away from your hands. So wash your hands through and through, at least for 20 seconds. Wash them often, and then get into all the little crevices, little web spaces. Get on top, get up to the wrists, okay, and then wash them thoroughly. I'm wearing jewelry in this video because I've been out of the hospital, but when I'm at work, I don't even bring jewelry to work anymore because I'm either going to be wiping them down or not cleaning them properly enough and be potentially transmitting germs, if not COVID, in that fashion. So probably what I'll start doing to just even get rid of that potential complication is stop wearing jewelry altogether. So there you go. That's a longer video, bird free, but they're also chiming in with their bird opinions in the background. Any questions, comments, concerns, new data? Would love to see new data, new papers. I know it's changing multiple times a day. Post them below. And again, we'll see if these videos ever make the light of day. Who knows? They may not. Till next time, wash your hands.